Welcome to another video lecture by Utkalp Digital Classes. I am your tutor Raghav Chaturvedi, and today we are going to dive into the next topics of ray optics, which include refraction, apparent depth and lateral shifts, refraction by curved surfaces, and lenses. Now we begin our discussion about refraction. So refraction is the phenomena in which the direction of propagation of light changes at the boundary when it passes from one medium to the other. So the first thing that you should note from here is in refraction, the frequency of the light does not change. So frequency of light does not change. Okay. You should note that the velocity of light does change upon refraction. Okay. And we know that velocity is equal to lambda into your frequency, right? So if mu is not changing and velocity is changing, that implies your wavelength and velocity change. Okay, so this should be very clear, as it will be more evident as we read further. So first of all, just like reflection, let me talk to you about the laws of refraction. So there is something known as the incident ray, there is something known as the refracted ray. Okay, so I've made here the incident ray, which is noted by this line. I made the refracted ray which goes into the medium. So this is my surface that is separating two types of mediums. Okay, in reflection, what did you have? You had the surface, okay, and then you shined and it came back in the same direction. Okay, this was the incident ray, this was your reflected ray. Okay, now in the case of refraction, what do we have? For refraction, it passes through the medium. Okay, first law that you should remember is the incident ray, the refracted ray, and the normal to the surface, which is denoted by this thing, they all lie in the same plane. I can write this in the vector form as well for your ease. I can write E cap, which is the direction of the incident ray, cross product with the normal, okay, and dotted with R cap is equal to 0. Okay, because these are coplanar vectors. Next, that you should remember, something that you should remember is the product of the refractive index and the sign of angle of incidence at a point in the medium is constant. So R mu into sine I is equal to mu 2 into sine R. So basically mu into sine of theta is constant in refraction. Now what is mu? Mu or n in some texts is nothing but the ratio of the velocities of light in vacuum to the velocity of light in some medium. Okay, so this you should definitely remember. This is also referred to as the absolute refractive index. Okay, so what this means is denser the medium, lesser will be the speed of light, and so greater will be the refractive index. I'll just write this down for you to note as well. So because you know that mu or n is equal to c by v, okay, then you should note that denser the medium, okay, lesser will be the speed of light in it. Okay, therefore greater will be the refractive index, so refractive index will be greater. So as we know, velocity in glass is less than velocity in water. Okay, therefore the refractive index of glass is greater than refractive index of water. Now first thing that you should note from these things is the quantity which is relative refractive index, which will come out many times. So in this first figure, I've written down the refractive index of the first medium, which is the For example, if my first medium had a velocity of light v1 in it, okay, then I can write that mu1 is equal to c by v1. Similarly, mu2 can be written as c by v2, where v1 is the velocity of light in first medium, v2 is the velocity of light in the second medium. With this in mind, I've drawn a simpler picture here as well, showing the same thing. So we come at something known as the relative refractive index. So when light passes from one medium to the other, the refractive index of the medium 2 relative to 1 is written as 1 mu2, which is nothing but mu2 divided by mu1. Okay, and if you just use the definitions above, you can see that it is equal to v1 by v2. Okay, so one thing that you should note from here is mu2 by mu1 is equal to v1 by v2 is equal to lambda 1 by lambda 2. Why? Because v is equal to lambda into nu. So this you should definitely remember. This is extremely useful from the examination point of view. So I'll just mark this as equation number, let's say 3. We'll mark this as the equation. This is known as the Snell's law. This is equation number 1. What does the first law say, or the first equation that I have written? So the value of this mu into the sine of angle of incidence is equal to the value of the second one into the sine of the refracted ray. Okay, the angle of the refracted ray. You should definitely consider this, and we'll talk more about this. So we arrive at bending of light. So according to the first law, it says that if light passes from a rarer to a denser medium, okay, so that means if in this diagram, if mu1 is equal to mu of a rarer medium and mu2 is equal to mu of a denser medium, okay, then sin I by sin r is equal to mu d by mu r will be greater than 1. Okay, so I can write this down somewhere here. So if sine of I divided by sine of r is equal to mu d by mu r, okay, and this is greater than 1, as we already know, that means the angle I is greater than angle r. So what this basically implies is, if you want to remember it, if light is passing from a rare to a dense medium, it bends towards the normal. Okay, and how much does it bend? It depends on how denser the medium is with respect to the first medium. Okay, similarly, if light is passing from inside to the outside, we'll just look at these. Okay, I'll just try to draw these. So if I have a slab like this, okay, and let's just try to make the incident ray. If this is coming from a dense, so this is a dense medium, let's say it has a mu d, okay, or refractive index with a d mark. This is the this is the rarer medium mu r. I have an incident ray. Let me draw the normal at this point. Then what will happen to the refracted ray, or what will happen? Look, it will not go in the same direction. It will not go in this direction. What will happen is it will slightly bend, okay, and it will bend away from the normal. So this is r and this is I. Then what we find here is angle I is less than angle r. Okay, so you should definitely take this into consideration and make a small note out of it. Okay, so in passing from a denser to a rarer medium, the ray bends away from the normal, and when passing from a rarer to a denser medium, the ray bends towards the normal. Okay, next we quickly review the apparent depth and lateral shift. So what we have is here, there are two conditions. In the first case, let's consider that you have a denser medium and you have a rarer medium. Okay, there are two types of mediums here. This has a refractive index mu r, this has a refractive index mu d. Now what happens here is, you are trying to look at the object. Now let's say the object is placed at this point. Okay, now how do you actually see something? you see something, if this is my eye, okay, this is my eye, then I can see, then this region that I can see is known as the field of view. Okay, I cannot see beyond a certain range of angles. Now, if I want to see a certain object, okay, what happens is the ray of light from that object, for example, this is my eye again, the ray of light from an object should reach my eye. Okay, as soon as the ray reaches, then my eye figures out that the object is placed at this position. Okay, now what happens in this case? If the object is placed in a denser medium, then my object, if the ray OB is going like this, okay, then what will happen is it will refract here, it will not go in this direction, it will refract and bend to away from the normal, because it's going from a denser to a rarer medium. So when the light reaches my eye, my eye assumes that light is traveling in a straight line, it's not bending at all. So it assumes that the object is along this line that I'm darkening right now. So it assumes that the body is somewhere around this point. Okay, so actual body is somewhere else, but the eye assumes that the body is at someplace else. You might have seen it in a lake or a pool, that uh, you're you're not able to correctly say where the feet are or where some pebbles are on the floor. So this is why this happens. And what really you need to know from here is, if this is the actual depth of the object by denoted by DAC, okay, what happens is your eye assumes that your object is at a different depth, which is the known as the apparent depth. Okay, this distance from the bottom to that apparent depth will be denoted by x, which is basically the shift. So this was your original position, and this is where this position is where your eye sees it. So let's call this as some position y. Okay, so my eye is making a error of this much. So I can represent this by equations, and we'll look at some examples on how these work. So my DAC by DAP, which is the D of actual or actual depth, I'll just write these down for you to remember. So DAC is equal to actual depth of object Similarly, I have my DAP, which is the apparent depth of object. Okay, apparent is what, it's not the actual one. Apparent means that we are thinking that it is at that point. Okay, for us it seems as if the object is at some other point. Okay, that is why sometimes in swimming pools you might have seen that your feet look smaller. Okay, from when you're looking from outside, it seems as if your feet are somewhere around here. Okay, so you have DAC by DAP is equal to the refractive index of the denser medium divided by the refractive index of the rarer medium, which is nothing but mu1 by mu2 here. Okay, with this we can easily arrive at the first equation, which is your shift or the distance between the object and its image, which is known as the normal shift. It is nothing but your actual depth into 1 minus 1 divided by mu. Okay, so this you should definitely take into consideration. What is mu? I have written mu here. Actually this equation is x is equal to d 1 minus mu r by mu d. Okay, if this was air, then mu r becomes 1. That is why I wrote this equation, but the more general one is this. Okay, so this distance x, okay, which is will be known as the shift between the object and the apparent position where we see that the object is, will be given by this, whereas your apparent depth will be given by this formula. So I can, from here I can easily write that d apparent is equal to d actual divided by the mu that is there, or relative mu. This is mu d if mu r is equal to 1, or else this is nothing but the relative one. Okay, with these equations we'll look at some problems as well. Before that, let's consider the second case, which is the case when the object is in a rarer medium and we are trying to see it from a denser medium. What happens here? Your eye is here. Okay, so what will happen is, uh, a ray from here reaches the point B and it moves towards the more normal instead of going in this direction. When it moves towards the normal and my eye is looking at this ray, it assumes that it is coming from some other point. Okay, because it is assuming that light is not bending at all. So it assumes that the object is actually present right over here. Okay, so here also what you have is, a high flying object appears to be higher than in the reality. Okay, and here you can have your x is equal to d apparent minus d ac, which is true for the above case as well, so you should note this. Okay, this is the shift. So x is equal to d apparent minus dac, and which is nothing but mu minus 1 into dac. Okay, mu is again the mu for the denser one. I am assuming that mu for the first one, this is air, so this is mu, this has a mu is equal to 1. With this in mind, we can look at lateral shifts. So the perpendicular distance between incident and emergent ray is known as the latent shift. You might have done this in your labs. So where there is a glass slab and then you have an incident ray. Okay, and because these two surfaces are parallel to each other and it is going from the same medium to the same medium again, so what happens is, upon refraction at this point, it will bend away from the normal. Okay, and then after refraction from this point, it will again bend towards the normal. Sorry, this is from rarer, this is rare, this is dense. So what we see is, when it's coming in, it gets refracted from here, and because this is the denser medium, it is moving towards the normal, and after refraction from here, it is going from a denser to a rarer medium again. Okay, so it will bend away from the normal. When this happens what we want to find out is the lateral shift, which is denoted by this distance d. So it is the lateral distance between the initial path, which would have been this, okay, and the actual path that it goes along. Okay, note that these two are parallel, but we need to find this distance. We can easily find this using the triangles that are available here. Okay, you can take a look at the triangle BOC and you can take a look at the triangle OBD, where sine I minus R is equal to BC by OB in the first case. So I can just write this down if you want to derive it in the paper as well. So if I take triangle BOC, okay, I can look, C is not visible here, so I'll just remove this. So if I take triangle BOC, what do I see? That sine of I minus R is equal to BC by OB is nothing but D by OB. Okay, that implies I can write my D is equal to OB into sine I minus R. Okay, similarly in triangle OBD, what do I see? I can easily see that cos R, I'll write this in next line so that it's not confusing. Cos of R is equal to OD by OB. Okay, that implies I can write my OB is equal to T by cos R. Okay, with this we easily get the equation that I wrote here for you, which is your lateral shift is nothing but T divided by cos R into sine of I minus R. Okay, T was what? T was the thickness of the slab. So T is equal to, so in the questions you will be given the thickness of the slab and some of the angles. and you will be asked to find the lateral shift that is there. Note that if multiple slabs are given to you, for example, if after this there is another slab of some other refractive index, then the same process will repeat. It will go here and it will bend away or towards the normal, and then the same process will be at the end. If you arrive at the same medium, then it will be parallel to the first one. Okay, parallel to this ray. So this should be kept in mind, and every time you can use the same derivation that I did here. You just take the two triangles and find the relations between them. Then you can easily solve it if the question becomes a little tricky. Similarly, you have the transparent glass slab. If we talked about lateral shift here, okay, so this was your lateral shift. Okay. Similarly, I have the normal shift, which is so when you place an object in front of a glass slab, okay, it shifts the object in the direction of the incident light and forms a distance at x. So you have the object right here, it gets refracted again. So what happens is, if you have an eye here, it will observe this light coming in, so it will retrace its path and say that the object is actually placed somewhere around here, but this is your virtual image that is there. Okay, this is what I assume the image to be at. So for this you have another equation which is similar to the ones that we've been reading before. So this displacement is nothing but t into 1 minus 1 by mu. Okay, where t is the thickness again, and x is the distance between these two. This is similar to what we've been reading for the apparent and lateral as the apparent depth case. So nothing much changes here. You just need to make sure that you know these equations. Okay. Some golden key points that I want to tell you about that you should note before going further. First of all, velocity of light c is equal to 1 by root over epsilon naught into u naught. Okay, you should definitely take this into consideration. And for velocity in a medium, what will you have? You will have velocity in a medium is nothing but 1 by root of epsilon into mu. Okay, so when you're trying to find the refractive index, which is nothing but mu is equal to c by velocity in the medium, okay, it is nothing but root epsilon mu by epsilon naught mu naught, which is equal to root of epsilon r mu r. This will be essential when we go forward. Another case that I want to just mention here is refraction through a composite slab. So if there are slabs, I have the observer right over here, I have the object right over here, and if there are multiple slabs of different refractive indexes in between, right now we only had one slab, okay, in between them. If we have multiple slabs of different thicknesses t1, t2, t3 and refractive indexes n1, n2, n3 and so on, then the apparent shift for this case, okay, which was x in the above case, so apparent shift is nothing but t1 into 1 minus 1 by n1 relative. Now what is n1 relative? N1 relative is n1 with respect to n2, next will be n2 with respect to n3, next will be n3 with respect to n0, okay, and this will go on till the n number of slabs that are there. So you have to just add all these terms, okay, and every time just note that whatever mu that you write or the refractive index that you write, it is similar to this formula above, okay, and whenever you write this, it is the relative refractive index between the two mediums wherever the refraction is happening. Okay, this should be kept in mind because questions from this have come in the past. Next, we look at a small but very interesting topic from the point of view of the examination, which is known as total internal reflection. So when light ray is traveling from a denser to a rarer medium, it bends away from the normal if the angle of incidence is increased, and the angle of refraction will also be increased. At a particular value of angle, the refracted ray subtends an angle 90 degree with the normal, and this angle of incidence is known as the critical angle, which will be noted by theta c. Okay. Now, if the angle of incidence is further increased, then the ray comes back in the same medium, and we will call this phenomena as the total internal reflection. Let's see what is happening here. I have my object right over here. Okay. So because of this object is in the denser, first of all, the object needs to be in the denser medium. This has to be in the radial medium. You have to observe from the radial medium. So my light is going in this direction. Upon first refraction, it will bend away from the normal, right? If I increase the angle of incidence, okay, it will at a point, look at this, if I send in this line, it will bend further away. Okay, so after a point, what will happen is the refracted ray will go normal to the parallel to the plane. Okay, if I increase the angle of incidence further, then at a point what will happen is it will start to get refracted so much that it is not reflecting. What is actually happening is it is going to a refraction process. Okay, it is actually a refraction process, but what is happening is it's bending away so much from the normal that it seems as if the light is going back inside the system, so it's not escaping the system at all, it's not going out at all. So this is what total internal reflection means. You send your incident light at such an angle that upon refraction it bends away so much from the normal that it goes back into the system. Okay, here you should note that the least angle, this is the incidence angle, the least angle at which this happens is known as the critical angle, which will be denoted by theta c, critical angle. Okay, and the conditions for to TIR which are quite important are my angle of incidence should be greater than the critical C. Okay, light should always travel from the dense to the radial medium, so your traveling of ray should be from dense to rare medium. Okay, and this is all you need. Here you can easily apply the Snell's law. So for the Snell's law, what did we have? We had sine of theta 1 is equal to sine of theta I is equal to sine of theta r. Okay, at the boundary, note that sine of 90 degrees is equal to 1, so I have mu d, mu denser medium, into sine of theta c is equal to mu r into sine of 90 degree. Okay, so sine 90 is equal to 1, so I can easily write that sine theta c is equal to mu r by mu d. This is the equation that you should remember from here, or you can easily derive it in the paper as well. Okay, some important things that I want to talk to you about are, first of all, the angle of deviation, which will be denoted by lambda. Okay, this is the angle of deviation, and you can even calculate the angle of deviation for this system. What is the angle of deviation? If my incidence light is supposed to go in this direction and it gets bent, okay, so the angle by which it bends from its original path will be known as the angle of deviation. So delta is nothing but r minus I. Next, we are going to quickly revise the refraction at curved surfaces. So let mu1 be the refractive index of the medium in which the actual incident rays lie. Okay, so mu1 is the refractive index of the medium in which the actual incident rays are lying. Let m2 be the refractive index of the medium in which the actual refracted rays are lying, or mu2. So mu2 is in the area where the refracted rays lie. Let me call my object as O. Okay, let me call my pole as P. Let me call C as the center of curvature. Okay, and R is the radius of curvature, which is nothing but PC. Okay, which is nothing but distance. So when I talk about refraction from a curved surface, so this is my curved surface right over here. M given by this thing, okay, and this is one medium, this is another medium. So when refraction happens at a curved surface, I can find the image that is formed of this from this object, and using some uh, similar triangle properties and the properties of and the equation of Snell, I get my final relation, which I want you guys to remember, which says that mu2 divided by v minus mu1 divided by u is equal to mu2 minus mu1 divided by r. Okay, this is extremely essential for the paper. What this means is, this means that your refractive index of the medium in which the actual refractive rays lie divided by the image that is formed. Okay, so this is the distance of the image, this is the distance of the object. So mu2 by the image distance minus refractive index of the medium in which your object was lying divided by u is equal to mu2 minus mu1 by r. So note that r was already a constant. What all things are constant here? Mu2, mu1, mu and r are probably going to be given to you, and you will be given some u, and you can easily find v. Okay, this is what this will come down to, and an important application of this will be in lenses. But more importantly, if you know this formula, then there are several problems in which they give you that oil is kept over water. Okay, and problems similar to these, and you can have a spherical shell. Okay, you can have a spherical shell, and then they ask you, if you throw in light at some point, then where will the image be formed after the refractions that are there. So there will be two curved surfaces, one will be this one, first refraction. In the second case, the light will be traveling from this medium to the other medium, right? So if this is my medium number 1, this is medium number 2, this is medium number 3. Okay, so light comes from medium 1 to 2. For this you will apply this equation once and find the image. Next, when you find the image, if the image is inside, that will act as the object for the next refraction at this surface, and then you will use the equation again to find where the actual image lies. Let's take a look at another question. The eye can be regarded as a single refracting surface. The radius of curvature of the surface is equal to that of the cornea. So the radius of curvature is given to you. Okay, and this is not a lens, it's a single refracting surface. So it's something like this. Okay, this surface separates two media of refractive index 1 and 1.34. So let this be mu is equal to 1, and let this be mu is equal to 1.34. Okay, so this is a question of refraction by curved surfaces. Calculate the distance from the refracting surface at which a parallel beam of light will come to focus. Okay, so I am given a parallel beam of light. Okay, let first of all this be the principal axis. This is your parallel beam of light. Okay, now I can use the formula for refraction as at a curved surface, which was nothing but mu2 by v minus mu1 by u is equal to mu2 minus mu1 by r. Okay, if I here I am given r is equal to 7.8 millimeter. Okay, and mu1 and mu2 I have already defined for you. So just by substituting the things here, what do I find? I find that 1.34, which is mu2, divided by v, or the image, minus mu1 is 1 divided by u is given to be infinity because they are coming from infinity, that is why they are parallel. Okay, is equal to 1.34 minus 1 divided by 7.8. Okay, this can be easily solved, this goes to 0. So this gives me that v is nothing but 30.7 millimeter, which is similar to 3.1 centimeter. Next, let us talk about lenses. So a lens is a piece of transparent material with two refracting surfaces such that at least one is curved and refractive index of its material is different from that of its surroundings. Okay, so we'll be considering thin spherical lenses in our chapter. Okay, and we'll have probably two types of major lenses, which are convergent or convex lens, okay, and you have the divergent or concave lens, okay. uh, Note that if the central portion of a lens is thinner than the marginal, it diverges, the rays that are parallel, and behaves as a divergent concave lens. We'll talk about these soon. So let me just zoom into this. You have different radius of curvatures. So in a lens, what will you have? You will have two curved surfaces, 1 and 2. Okay. So for the first curved surface, it is part of some sphere which has its own center, its own radius. For the second surface, it's part of some other sphere. It has its own center, its own radius. That is why the lens is formed of two curved surfaces. Okay, and for each surface, you will have a different radius of curvature. Okay, so you can have a biconvex lens where both the surfaces are convex. You can have an equiconvex lens. Okay, you can have a plano-convex lens in which one of the radius of curvatures is infinity. You can have a concavo-convex in which one is concave and the other is convex. You can have a biconcave in which both the surfaces are concave. You can have equiconcave where both are concave but they have the same radius of curvature. You can have a plano concave where one is infinity and one is your normal radii. You can have a convexo concave. These are the different kinds of lenses that might come in the paper. The first focal point is the object point on the principal axis for which image is formed at infinity. So I have drawn this for you right here. This is the first one. Okay, as you can see here that the object is placed at the first focus and the image is formed at infinity. In the other one, for the concave lens, you can see that the object seems to be diverging from the first focus and it's again focusing an image or making an image at infinity. What about the second focal point? So second focal point is an image point on the principal axis for which object lies at infinity. So if the object is at infinity right here, then we have parallel rays coming in, and after refraction we get that these rays meet at a focal point f2. Similarly, for a concave lens, you will have parallel rays coming in from infinity, okay, and they seem to diverge from the point f2. Okay, so first of all, for the convex lens, you should remember that it's a converging lens. So if I have a convex lens and if a light comes in, it is likely to go in. Okay, if I, on the other hand, if I have a concave lens, then it is likely to diverge out. Okay, this should be very clear at the onset. Next, what is focal length f? So focal length is defined as the distance between the optical center of a lens and the point where the parallel beam of light converges or appears to converge, which is given by f in both the cases. Okay. Similar to mirrors, you have the aperture here. So in reference to a lens, aperture means the effective diameter. Now intensity of the image formed by a lens, which depends on the light passing through the lens, will depend on the square of the aperture. So this is an equation that, or a relation that you should definitely remember, that intensity, I'll write this again, intensity is directly proportional to the square of, okay, square of aperture. Next, we talk about the lens maker's formula. So the lens maker's formula will definitely help us out in trying to find the image or the focal length of a lens that is given to you. It can be any of the lenses that we've read about. It can be any of these. Okay, so for each of these, you can easily find what is the focal length. Note that uh, for in case of the mirrors, you had a simple relation where f was equal to r by 2. But here this condition is not valid for all the cases. So what we have is, you have a lens with a refractive index given by mu l and it is kept in a medium with a refractive index mu m. Okay, there are two surfaces of the lens. This is the first surface which is in front of the object, This is the second surface. Okay, for the first surface you will have a center of curvature C1 and a radius of curvature R1. Similarly, for the second surface you will have a radius of curvature R2 and the center as C2. Okay, then what will happen is you will take this object, a ray will go in, it will get refracted here, and using the formulas that I just told you about refraction at a curved surface, you will try to find the image. Okay, so because of the refraction at the first surface, you will find a image. Let's say it comes at I1, then this I1 will act as the object for the refraction at the second surface, and after that refraction you will get your answer or your image at some point I. So using these principles and the above law again or two times, I find that my refraction at the curved surfaces formulas reduced down to a very simple formula that will be accessible for the examination, which says that 1 by the focal length is equal to mu minus 1, where mu is what? Mu is mu of tensor medium by mu of lens by mu of medium. Okay, this is your actual mu. So mu is equal to mu L by mu M. You have mu minus 1, 1 by R1 minus 1 by R2. R1 is the first surface, R2 is the second surface. Okay, this formula uh, actually reduces down to 1 by F is equal to 1 by V minus 1 by U when both the radii are the same. But so you can calculate your focal length. You can calculate your focal length easily for any lens if either you're given the image and the object, or you're given the radii of curvature. Okay, so I think it is better for anyone to calculate the focal length of a material given only the physical properties of the material, not by how an experiment gave its results. Okay, so although this is also essential for you, you should also take a note of the lens maker's formula because that will be extremely essential. Similarly, for this case also you can find the magnification. Note that here the magnification is h1 by h naught, or h of image by h of object. It's nothing but v by u. So for the mirror case you had minus v by u. Here it is v by u. Okay, the rest of the things are just the same. Okay. Similar to mirrors, you have the aperture here. So in reference to a lens, aperture means the effective diameter. Now intensity of the image formed by a lens, which depends on the light passing through the lens, will depend on the square of the aperture. So this is an equation that, or a relation that you should definitely remember, that intensity, I'll write this again, intensity is directly proportional to the square of, okay, square of aperture, intensity of light that is passing through the lens. Okay, with this in mind, let's go down and learn about the lens maker's formula. This is probably the top 5 formulas from the entire ray optics section, because if you know this, then the specifics of this formula can be applied to find whatever values that you need to find in the paper. So for a lens, if you want to find the image formation of the lens, then you have a simple relation which is given by 1 by the focal length is equal to mu minus 1, where mu is what? Mu is your relative mu, which is nothing but the mu of the lens divided by mu of the medium. Okay, I just want you to make a note of this because the derivation for this is not very long. It's actually a two-step process. What it involves is a reflection at a curved surface here. Okay, the first curved surface using the object as this, and then what formula do you use? You use the formula which I already told you about, which is right over here. So you use this formula for refraction at the curved surface. Okay, and after you get the first image, you use that image as the object for the second part of the lens, and then you use the above formula again to arrive at these relations that I've given right here. So 1 by f is equal to mu minus 1 into 1 by r1 minus 1 by r2. Okay, what is r1? This is r1. Okay, and this is r2. So as the focal point 1 was on the left side for a concave convex lens. Okay, and focal 2 was on the right side. Similarly, here r1 is on the left side and r2 is on the right side. Note that r1 is for the surface which is right here, r2 is for the surface which is right here. Okay, we'll be using this formula quite a lot in many of the questions, so I definitely want you to make a small note of this. Okay, and you should note that this formula reduces down to the formula that you would have learnt in your class 9th and 10th, which is nothing but 1 by f is equal to 1 by v minus 1 by u. Okay, so this is so for lenses. If you have this is which will be known as the lens formula. Okay, and this is the specific case of your lens maker's formula. In this case, both your radii of curvature will be the same. Okay, and to calculate the magnification, you have another formula. Magnification m is nothing but h of image by h of object. Okay, height of image by height of object is equal to v by u. Okay, so note that it is equal to v by u here. For the previous case, we had minus v by u. So here also the sign convention remains the same. If you're going in the direction of light, you'll take those distances as positive, and if you're taking distances that are above the principal axis, they will be taken as positive. Okay, there are again rules for image formation for convergent and or convex lens, similarly for concave lens. So just as we did for mirrors, we'll quickly go through these rules. So first of all, if the object is placed at infinity, okay, if the object is placed at infinity, then the image is formed at the focal point f2. Okay, and it is real, inverted, and very small in size. Okay, next I'll just to clarify these things, I'll just try to write some things that you might note down. So mod m is less than 1 and m is less than 0. Okay, I've explained this in the circular case, sorry, the case of the mirrors, so you should know what this actually means. So if the first one, this thing means that it is diminished, and the second one means that it is real and inverted. For the second one, what do we have? We have the object is placed in between infinity and 2f, or 2f was basically your radius of curvature when it was the case of your mirrors. Right now you don't have a simple relation such as f is equal to r by 2. That is why you're just writing 2f here. So if it's placed between infinity and minus 2f, okay, then you have that it is having a mod m less than 1. So it is, and m is less than 0. So it is again diminished. Okay, maybe not to that much extent, but it's still real and inverted. Next is the case of when the object is placed at 2f. Okay, so image here is of the same size, m is equal to minus 1. Note these are quite similar to the cases that we were studying for the other mirrors as well. Okay, the fourth case is for the object is between 2f and f. Okay, here mod m is greater than 1 and m is less than 0. What about when the object is placed in between f and o? Okay, when the object is placed between f and o, I have a m which is greater than plus 1. That implies it is enlarged, okay, and it is virtual and erect. These things should be kept in mind. You should note that most of the things that we are doing uh, draw a similar analogy between convergent, or sorry, I'll just write this in a separate way. My convex lens has properties which are similar to my concave mirror. For example, it has different cases, and for each case you have either have diminished cases or you have enlarged images. Similarly, for concave lens, which we'll discuss next, they have property similar to your convex mirror. Okay, so you should just remember this in terms of cases and where the images will be found. So the case of concave lens or divergent lens, which it is called, you should always remember that image is always virtual, diminished, erect, and towards the object. M is equal to positive always. Okay, but M is positive, but M is less than plus 1 here, and M is less than plus 1 in this condition. So the first case is when the object is at infinity. The second case is when the object is placed in front of the lens. Okay. So what you notice here, although there is a virtual and erect image, but you get a diminished image. So you have diminished, virtual, and erect. However, if you wanted to compare this to the last case of the previous one, you have virtual and erect but enlarged image. So this is what you should definitely remember. This is the comparison between the two cases. Okay. With this in hand, we can also define the power of the lens. Power is again P is equal to 1 by F in meters, and it will be denoted by diopters. Let's talk about some combination of lenses. These are also essential questions that often come in the paper. So if I have two lenses, two thin lenses, and I separate them by a distance d, okay, which I've done here. Well, let the first one has the focal length f1, second has the focal length f2. Then my equivalent focal length 1 by f is equal to 1 by f1 plus 1 by f2 minus d by f1 f2. Okay. Further, in terms of power, I can write P is equal to P1 plus P2 minus D into P1 P2. Okay. This is an essential formula. You should definitely remember this, as it has been asked in the questions before. Second is something known as the Newton's formula. The actual paper generally never asks for this. Okay, but you never know, so you should just keep this in the back of your mind. It is not a difficult relation to maintain. So if you have a lens, and if x1 is the distance of the object from the focus, okay, from the focus, and x2 is the distance of the object image from the focus, then I can easily find my focal length to be root of x1 into x2. Okay. So this comes in very handy if your question gives you x1 and x2. Okay. We'll just look at some of the special cases of combinations. So let's look at the first one. Here the focal length of the equiconvex lens is need to be determined when we are placing this in here. Okay. So what is the focal length for this? For the R1, object is on the first of all object is on the left side. Okay. And you see that the R1 is positive and R2 is negative. Okay. With this in mind, I can easily write that my focal length f is equal to r by 2 into mu minus 1. Okay. Next, let's talk about the second one, which is one of the radii is infinity. Okay, one radii is just positive. Okay, so I have I can easily write this down as what I'll just tell you how to actually do this. So I have 1 by f is equal to mu minus 1 into 1 by r minus 1 by infinity. Okay, so that implies my focal length will come out to be r by mu minus 1. You can derive each of these. So what you just need to know is what are the radii of curvature. Here the first surface is the radii of curvature infinity. Second has a radii of curvature which is f minus r. Why is this so? So uh, okay, it's not f minus r. It's just the same thing again. Okay, so for this case or for this case, for the both the cases you will get the same value of focal length, which is r by mu minus 1. Okay, this is just some r. Next is the case of a equiconvex lens of focal length f. Okay, so if a equiconvex lens of focal length f is cut into two equal parts by a horizontal plane, I've cut it into two parts. Okay, then the focal length of each part will be equal to that of the initial lens. Okay, so both will have the same focal length. Why? Because even if I cut it in this way, the radii of curvature of the two faces is not changing at all. Okay, so always remember this. But one thing that you should remember is because the apertures have changed, apertures have reduced, so that is why the intensity will reduce for this case. If I consider the next case in which I cut it like this, if I cut the same lens into two equal parts by vertical plane, okay, then the focal length of each part will be double of the initial value, but intensity will remain unchanged because the aperture is not changing, so intensity will not change, but the focal length will become doubled. Why? Because previously you had two surfaces like this and you had a radius of curvature of 1 and the for the second one. Now if you cut it like this, one becomes r but the second one is infinity. So when we use this formula, 1 by f is equal to mu minus 1 into 1 by r 1 minus r, this formula. Okay, I'll see that it actually becomes twice its original value. Okay, this is one of the things that you should remember, because in terms of intensity and in terms of focal length, questions have been asked before. Next is the case if a lens is made of a number of layers of different refractive index for a given wavelength. For example, it has different refractive indexes here. Okay, then the number of images is equal to the number of refractive index. Okay, so number of images is equal to number of refractive indexes. Okay, one more thing that I want to talk to you about here is about the focal length. Okay, focal length of the lens depends on the wavelength. So 1 by f is directly proportional to mu minus 1, as we saw from the lens maker's formula, is directly proportional to 1 by lambda because mu depends on lambda. Okay, so that implies f is proportional to lambda, or focal length for the red color is greater than the focal length for the violet color. So if I have a lens and I have a white beam coming in, so the red one will the violet one will converge somewhere here, the red one will converge after some distance because the focal length of violet is less than that of red. So this is for violet, this is for red. We'll look at these in the next one or after a point. The next case that I wanted to discuss was if half portion of the lens is covered by a black paper, then the intensity of the image will be reduced but complete image will be formed. Okay, so when you blacken something out, so intensity of image goes down. Okay, but what happens is full image formed. Okay, now the next is if the refractive index of the medium is equal to the refractive index of the lens. Okay, if both are same, then there will be no proper refraction and the rays will just pass through. Okay, in this case, if you try to find the 1 by f, okay, it turns out to be infinity. Okay, and power turns out to be 0. So you should definitely take these things into consideration. The next one is when the refractive index of medium is greater than the refractive index of the lens. So this is a favorite topic from the point of view of the examination. If the medium is greater than the lens, then what will happen is my mu m, that implies mu l by mu m, is less than 1, or therefore my focal length will be negative. For a even for a convex lens, my focal length will be negative. So what this means is, if this is the condition where the medium has a higher refractive index, then concave lens will behave like lens behaves like convex lens and vice versa. Let's start another question. A convex lens is put 10 cm from a light source and it makes a sharp image on a screen which is kept 10 cm from the lens. So let's just see what this situation means. You have a source, let's say you have a lens here and you have a screen here. Okay, I'll not make these things. So I'll just simply make a normal screen here. Let this be the principal axis. Now it's given that this distance between the lens and the source is 10 centimeter. Also, it's given that there is a sharp image on the screen. So there is a 10 centimeter distance between these two as well, between the screen and the lens. Now it's written a glass block of refractive index 1.5 and a 1.5 centimeter thickness is placed in contact with the light source. To get the sharp image again, the screen is shifted by a distance d. You need to calculate d. Okay. So first of all, we know v, we know u. So first of all, we need to find what is the focal length of the lens in order to proceed with anything else. So here the lens formula will come into action. So we'll just quickly write what the lens formula is. It's 1 by v minus 1 by u is equal to 1 by f. Okay. If I just substitute the values that are already given in the question, it translates to 1 by 10 minus 1 by minus 10 is equal to 1 by f. Okay, which gives me f is equal to 5 centimeter. Now with this in hand, I need to calculate the shift due to slab. Let me call that shift is equal to d, and we already saw that it's a very simple formula. It's basically your thickness into 1 minus 1 by your mu. Okay, mu is given to be 1.5 to me, so I'll just calculate this. So d is equal to thickness is 1.5 centimeter, 1 minus, now 1.5 can be written as 3 by 2, so this becomes 2 by 3, which gives me an answer as 0.5. Okay, now we see that due to this thickness, what happens is your u becomes minus 9.5. Okay, so what happens is your source, my source distance, okay, it gets shifted by 0.5 centimeter towards the lens. Okay, now with this in mind, we can write the lens formula again, which says 1 by v minus 1 by u is equal to 1 by f. So 1 by v minus 1 by 9 minus 9.5 is equal to 1 by 5, which gives me v is equal to 95 by 9, nothing but 10.55 centimeter. Thus the screen is shifted by a distance d is equal to I'll just write this down properly. Screen is shifted by a distance d is equal to 10.55 minus 10 is equal to 0.55 centimeter away from the lens. Okay, so all you have to note from this question is, first of all, how to use this formula properly. Okay, and what this does to your distance when your object is placed like this. So what this actually means is, because you are applying something of a given thickness and of a different refractive index, it will change your actual distance with respect to that. Okay, note that because this was equal to 3 by 2, okay, or 1.5, so we got this value to be positive, which will be the case for most of the questions. Let's take a look at another question. A plano-convex lens of refractive index mu1 and focal length f1 is kept in contact with another plano-concave lens of refractive index mu2 and focal length f2. If the radius of curvature of the spherical surface is r each, and f1 is equal to 2 times f2, then mu1 and mu2 are related as what? Now, as you can see in this question, you are not given with object and distance and image distances, so you can use the lens maker's formula. So you can write 1 by f is equal to mu minus 1 into 1 by r1 minus 1 by r2. Okay, so I can write this as mu1 minus 1 into 1 by infinity minus 1 by minus r2 is equal to 1 by 2f2. Okay, this is for the plano convex lens. So this is for the first one that I have done it. Okay, plano convex. Okay, this is what a plano convex actually looks like, whether it's this or it's this. Okay, and what will be a plano concave? It will be something like this. Okay, so next I have, for a plano concave lens, I can write the same lens maker's formula. I have 1 by f is equal to mu2 minus 1 into 1 by minus r minus infinity minus 1 by infinity, sorry. Okay, dividing, we get, if I divide these two, I'll get mu1 minus 1 by r is equal to mu2 minus 1 by 2r, which can be solved easily, and this gives me 2 times mu1 minus mu2 is equal to 1. Let's look at another interesting question. An object is at a distance of 20 meters from a convex lens of focal length 0.3 meters. The lens forms an image of the object. If the object moves away from the lens at a speed of 5 meters per second, the speed and direction of the image will be what? Okay, in order to find anything related to speeds, first of all, you should know what the formulas for the relation between v and u are. So for a lens, I have the lens formula, which says 1 by v minus 1 by u is equal to 1 by f. If I just substitute the values here, I can easily get that 1 by v minus 1 by minus 20 is equal to 10 by 3. Okay. This gives me 1 by v is equal to 197 by 60, or v is equal to 60 by 197. Okay, now the magnification of lens, which is defined by m. Okay, my magnification is given by v by u for a lens. Okay, so this is nothing but 60 by 197 divided by 20. Okay, now the velocity of image with respect to the lens is given by velocity of image with respect to lens is nothing but m square into velocity of object with respect to length. Okay, and what is m square? It is v square by u square. So I can write this easily down. First of all, we are already given that velocity of object with respect to length is 5 meter per second, and you should also note the direction of velocity of image is the same as that of the object. Now writing this down, I easily have velocity of image with respect to length. It's nothing but 60 into 1 by 197 into 20 whole square into 5. This is m square into 5. This is nothing but 1.16 into 10 raised to the power minus 3 meter per second towards the lens. We can try doing another question. What is the position and nature of image formed by lens combination shown in the figure? F1 and F2 are focal lengths. Okay, so because it's a lens, first of all, by lens formula I have 1 by V minus 1 by U is equal to 1 by F. Okay, so for the first lens I have U1 is equal to minus 20. Okay, for the first lens, so that implies if I just apply this to the formula, 1 by V1 minus 1 by minus 20 is equal to 1 by 5. That implies V1 is equal to 20 by 3. Now the image formed by this lens will behave as an object for the second lens. Therefore U2 is equal to 20 by 3 minus 2 is equal to 14 by 3. Okay, as you can easily see from the diagram. Now I apply the lens formula again for the second lens. It gives me 1 by V2 minus 1 by 14 by 3 is equal to 1 by minus 5. Okay, this gives me the value of V2 to be 70 centimeter. Okay, so my answer is fourth. Let's look at another question. A convex lens of focal length 20 centimeter and a concave mirror having their principal axis along the same lines are kept 10-80 centimeter apart from each other. So let's just make this clearly. Okay, so let this be my concave mirror, and we have a common principal axis. Then you can easily make your lens. You should be able to draw these things carefully. Let this be the object. The concave mirror is to the right of the convex lens when an object is kept at a distance of 30 centimeter to the left of the convex lens. So this distance is 30 centimeter. Okay, and this is 80. First, just drawing these things gives you a little more perspective about the question. Its image remains at the same position. So its image remains at the same position even if the concave mirror is removed. So the maximum distance of the object for which this concave mirror by itself would produce a virtual image would be. So this utilizes another concept which is about the center of curvature of the mirror. So let's first of all, for the lens, use the lens formula to find where the image would be. So 1 by V minus 1 by U is equal to 1 by F. Okay, this gives me 1 by V minus 1 by minus 30 is equal to 1 by 20. Okay, this gives me that V is equal to plus 60 centimeter. Okay, now is the thing that I want you to guys to note. So according to the condition, it's given that the image formed by the lens should be the center of curvature of the mirror. Why? Because after refraction, it's going through some point on the principal axis, so that it's retracing its path. Okay, so what does it mean? Because they have said that the image remains at the same position even if the concave mirror is removed. That means that the concave mirror is not really changing the path of the light. Okay, it's just sending it back to the same path. Okay, so that is why I can easily write that the image formed by the lens is at the center of curvature of the mirror. So 2 times f prime is equal to 20, or f prime is nothing but 10 centimeter. Okay, so this should be very clear. These kinds of questions have been asked in the paper before as well. Let's take a look at another question. A convex lens of focal length 20 centimeter produces images of the same magnification 2 when an object is kept at two distances x1 and x2, with x1 greater than x2 from the lens. The ratio of x1 and x2 is what? So let's first see what magnification of a lens looks like. It is nothing but v by u. Okay, so I can write minus 2 is equal to v1 by x1. That implies v1 is equal to minus 2 times x1. Okay, next we know that 1 by v minus 1 by u is equal to 1 by f. Okay, with this in mind, I can easily write that 1 by minus 2 times x1 minus 1 by x1 is equal to 1 by 20. Okay, now this gives me that x1 is equal to 30 centimeter. Now I want to see the same thing for x2. I have for x2 1 by 2x2 minus 1 by x2 is equal to 1 by 20, which gives me x2 is equal to minus 10 centimeter. Okay, therefore if I want to calculate x1 and by x2, so x1 by x2 is nothing but 30 by 10, nothing but 3.